what we say they are. All right, next slide.
Okay.
So our vision is to help create a path for clean energy and a sustainable economy that honors our values and everyone's health and a shared future by reducing our CO2 emissions in our nation. Next slide. We are a B certified corporation. Basically, to be a B certified corporation, you have to report on sustainability for the business, for the workers, customers, suppliers. And this is not easy to accomplish, and it's something that's part of our core values, and is something that we're proud to be a part of. These are our clear values. The areas that I think we take very serious and has always led to continued success for the company is our commitment to education, our local communities, helping people join the solar tribe. We advocate for clean energy at the state level. We've been, and we have employees that have been very, very instrumental in helping legislation pass both in Missouri and Illinois. Our values, we focus on respect for people and planet and excellence in everything that we do. Go ahead, Riley. Hi, Stephen. Glad you could join us. So a couple things that we're going to cover. We're just going to do some Solar 101 that might prompt some questions. Talk a little bit about the environmental impact, different solar options, solar with batteries, the incentives, some residential financing, and then we'll take a look at the system that we installed here at my house last July. So let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead. So most of us kind of understand how this works. The sun shines on our panels, it detaches electrons in DC current, and that flows through our solar array. So we see more and more of these panels on people's roofs. We drive by and we see them in big fields. I think it's pretty obvious that people have identified the benefits of generating electricity for their business and their home and reducing their dependency on their utility company. The next thing is the inverter. This is where we convert DC electricity from our solar panels to AC electricity, which is what your house uses. Next slide. Now, a lot of times, especially in the summer, your home and your solar array will produce a substantial amount more of electricity than what you use. So once you have your inverter producing electricity off of your solar array, your house is first in line for using that electricity. So any load that you place on your solar system, that electricity, it follows the path of least resistance. So it comes right from your solar panels to your home, and then any excess flows back through your meter. And depending upon what utility company you use and their net metering policies, that is what determines your savings by implementing solar. So what we see in Southern Illinois, Ameren and Egyptian Electric have a 1-to-1 net metering policy. But if you get in some of the municipal co-ops or some of the electrical co-ops around, they don't do net metering, but what they do is they pay you the wholesale price for the energy that you generate and then deduct that from the retail price you pay for your usage. So when you're designing a system, it's really important to be focused on your utility company, what their policy is, and then design a system around that. Next slide, Riley. So we talked a little bit about net metering credits. The other thing about net metering is both Ameren and Egyptian Electric have an annual true-up. Most of our customers choose April for that. And the benefit and the reason why is because you have a substantial surplus of energy going into the fall and the winter that will carry you on your electric bills up until the spring. And then if for any reason you have generated more electricity over that year than what you've used, they reset the meter and you lose that credit. So what we always look to do is generate enough energy, especially between the equinoxes when the high production months are in place, to generate enough to carry us around to that April true up date. And when we size the system, we try to be real close or just a little bit under what your annual usage is represented on your utility bill. Next slide. So when it comes to monitoring, we have mobile apps that you can look at how your solar array is producing. You can see if you have a panel that is offline for any reason. You can see the spikes and the dips in your production as the cloudy, rainy days and the sunny days, roll by. And it's just a nice tool that you can not only confirm that your solar array is producing what it should be, but it also it gives you a nice feeling when you walk out and you look at your meter and you actually can see your meter running backwards, which I'll show you in a video here in a little bit. But when I think of monitoring, that's my key monitoring. I like to go and watch it run backwards. Next slide, Riley. So here is a real good example of what, as a product developer, one of the first things I ask from somebody is, can you send me the front of your utility bill? It'll show a rolling 12-month kilowatt per hour usage by month. And what we do then is we design a system. When we add up your kilowatt usage for the year, we design a solar system that mirrors that annual usage. And in the graph we're looking at, you can kind of see how that happens. So you see the spike in your production between the equinox months, and then you see the blue bar graphs are what your utility usage is. And that large chunk of surplus there in April, May, and June, it carries you in, even in those high energy months, if you turn on your pool pump or whatever, to where you're actually using more energy than you're producing. That surplus is what carries you through those next months. And there will be times where, you sit down and you look at how big of a system that you want. And for different reasons, maybe it's the amount of size or room you have on your roof or the money you have in your pocketbook or whatever it is, you might not go for 100% offset of your utilities. There are a lot of people that invest in solar that are just looking for a 60, 70, 80% offset, which is basically a 60, 70, 80% reduction in their utility costs for the year. Go ahead, Riley. Some of the environmental impacts. If you look at emissions that are avoided on the average size home. Now, this isn't the case in Southern Illinois. It seems like the 10 kW to 14 kW ground mounts seem to be the majority of what we sell down here. People have a little bit more room, and they have the ability to point a ground mount due south at 30 degrees, which is the maximum energy generation. So these numbers might be a little bit low to what the average is in this area, but we can offset approximately 14,000 miles driven by the average passenger vehicle, 6,000 pounds of coal burn. I don't know who sat down and figured that number out. 774,000 times to charge your smartphone, and it's the equivalent of planting 100 saplings a year for 10 years. So this is a pretty substantial amount of CO2 offset for just a small solar system. Some of the solar array options I mentioned earlier. Go ahead, Riley. You can have a roof mounted array or a ground mounted. This ground mount array here is one of the nicest I think I've seen. This, whoever this is, they've planted some nice flowers around it. It's just really a photogenic array. The argument for roof mounted, ground mounted, some people don't want to see their solar system, so they want to put it on the roof. Some people don't have room for it, so they put it on the roof. There are reasons why people go with a ground mount. Maybe they do have the room, or maybe their roof has too much shading from trees, or maybe it's not oriented to face south to where it can really capture a lot of good energy. So we can do pretty much anything. We can put them on pole barns. We can put them on shingled roofs. We can put them on the ground. We can put them on commercial buildings, flat roofs. So it doesn't really, matter what your application is. There's a solution for it. Next slide, right? These are the primary solar panels that we use, REC and LG. When you're looking at solar panels, there are all kinds of things to consider. Most of them are very similar. They're either a 60 cell or a 72 cell. There are some smaller, but it's a 5 foot long or a 6 foot long approximately. So depending upon the rake of your roof, how much room you have, how many gables, dormers, things like that, we would customize a solar system based upon the available solar panels and inverters that we have. You can see both of these panels have a 25-year warranty. The country of origin, and we carry the Twin Peak series for REC, which is what I have at my home, and then the LG is a little higher cost product. And then also notice they have different visuals. So somebody who has and this is maybe a silly preference for me, but when somebody has white fascia, white gutters, white trim on their house, I kind of like the way the RECs with the silver frames and the silver racking looks. But if you take a home that has a black roof, has darker colors for the trim, having one of these nice flat black panels is also an option. And both of these companies give you those options in their different panel selections. All right. These are the three manufacturers of the inverters that we carry. The SMA is it's a very simple, it's a low cost alternative. It's a string inverter, and we recommend these for systems that are looking right at the south, have no shading, and they just crank out energy. But if you have shading, if you have things like, let's say you got a big cloudy day with big puffy clouds and you have a cloud covering up 3 or 4 of your solar panels, it will affect the production of the rest of the system with a string inverter. So that's why we like to use these in really open, sunny applications. The next one is the Solar Edge. It is also a string inverter, but each individual panel has power optimizers on it. So in that application where you have a big cloud shading a portion of your array, the rest of the solar panels identify that, and they are managed by these individual power optimizers. This right here, the Solar Edge, is the inverters that I use here on our solar system. The next is the in-phase microinverters, and there are really 2 reasons why I recommend these to customers. If they have shading, so let's say they have a roof mount, but they do have some shading with trees, or if they are looking at a possible expansion, they're planning on adding a swimming pool in a couple of years, and they want to add additional panels, the in-phase with the microinverters on each panel, they are the cleanest, easiest system to upgrade to, because rather than, let's say if you add additional panels, now all of a sudden you've moved out of one size of inverter on the SMA or the Solar Edge, which would literally require replacing the inverter, to whereas in phase, you just add the panels to your inverter and increase the size of your system. So those are the 3 companies and the 3 inverters we offer and the differences between them. Go ahead, Ray. So let's talk a little bit about battery storage. I just came off of a webinar at 10 o'clock today on our Tesla Powerwall. We had over 60 participants in that meeting. So this is an area that people are really looking at. They're interested in knowing about it. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is with any solar system, you always have a disconnect out by the meter with a big red plaque on it. And that's so that if for some reason the power goes out and there's a lineman that's trying to figure out what's going on, he doesn't climb that pole and go up to that transformer and have electricity being fed back from our solar system. So when the grid goes down, the solar system goes down. So there are really 3 reasons why I think people should look at batteries. One is if you want to have power when the power goes out. Number 2, if you are on a utility company that pays you wholesale price and doesn't do 1-for-1 net metering, you can drive your consumption of the electricity that you generated off your solar system by using a battery and make a you can basically supplement your net metering policy or your wholesale payment by using more of your own electricity rather than sending it back to the grid. As I mentioned, we are a Tesla Powerwall installer. There are several battery options out there, but this particular product, it has some amazing features. The one that I think is really nice is it actually runs in tandem with your grid power, so that unlike a lot of other batteries, when your power goes off, your lights don't flicker. You don't have to go through and reset all your clocks. That's a big deal when the power goes out around my house, because it's unbelievable how many things have a blinking light on it. So that's one thing that I noticed about that product. The other is it has a weather feature, so that if there's a national weather station signal that comes out, it identifies that through the internet. And let's say, here we are on a Saturday and they're forecasting major storms on Monday. It identifies that, and through the next couple of days, it makes sure that that battery is at 100% going into that national weather notification. So there's a lot of programmability to this product that allows it to be very, very user friendly. It can be mounted outside, inside. It has a mobile app that allows you to monitor and then also change what items are pulling power off the system. So keep in mind, these are not to back your home up for 4 or 5 days with a power outage. They're to help you through brownouts, day and a half type power outages. And then we have alternatives. You can either back up your critical loads like your freezer, your refrigerator, your sump pump, things that you absolutely have to have. Keep a bank of lights and your entertainment center in the living room, and we can wire those individual circuits depending upon what you want. If you add more than one Tesla Powerwall, you can do a whole home backup. Without getting into too many specifics, one Tesla Powerwall will manage up to a 30 amp breaker, or 3 10 amp breakers, or a combination of 10 and 20. So if you string 2 Powerwalls together, you can run substantially more. And there aren't too many items in your home that pull more than a 30 or a 50 amp. So those are just a couple things to think about if you're looking at storage. Go ahead, Riley. These are some of the different batteries that we sell. The Tesla Powerwall, like I said, it's the best bang for your buck. It's the highest energy rating at the lowest cost, and it by far has, the programmable software that really makes it stand out compared to the others. Go ahead, Riley. Next slide, Riley. So let's talk a little bit about the incentives. If you have an interest in solar, you probably looked at these. We're currently at a 26% federal tax credit. It'll go down to 22% next year, and then the next year, unless the federal government makes some decisions to continue this tax credit, it currently is set to go away. Keep in mind, you do need a tax appetite to take this credit. It's really important if you invest in solar to take a look at that. And really, I recommend somebody sitting down with their accountant, because the way this works, and I'll try to make it simple, is if you, at the end of the year, you and your husband or yourself, if you have paid in, let's say $10,000 in taxes, in federal taxes, but you don't owe any more money and you're not getting a refund, and then you have a $10,000 tax credit on your solar system, you can get a $10,000 rebate check because of that solar system. Now, let's take another scenario. Let's say that you have a $6,000 at the end of the year. That's how much you have submitted in taxes. You don't owe any money and they don't owe you a refund, but you have a $10,000 tax credit. You're going to get $6,000 back, and you're going to carry $4,000 over until the next tax year. So the federal tax incentive is a reduction in your tax liability. And make sure that you understand that, and you sit down with your accountant and you look at your last year's income. If it's not changing much, you ought to make some good decisions there. Okay. And then here's a little example about how that works. It does cover the cost of insulation. If you need to do any roof reinforcement, it would cover that as well. And you must be the homeowner. The home must be owned by the taxpayer. Go ahead, Riley. The next one are the Illinois Solar Renewable Energy Credits. We call them SRECs. This was established back in 2016 as part of the Future Energy Jobs Act. The utilities are required to get renewable energy. We're working on this. I don't know if we'll be at 25% by 2025, but it's certainly a goal that we have. Money is set aside by the utilities to purchase renewable energy from our homeowners and small businesses. So an SREC equals 1 megawatt hour. And if you look at like my solar system is a 22.5 kW system. It generates about 38,000 kilowatts or 38 megawatts a year. So my SREC contract for 15 years is 38 times 15. And then each individual credit, depending on the size of the system, has a dollar value. But in my case, my system was about a $60,000 system. And between, I bought it when it was a 30% federal tax credit. But between the 30% tax credit and the SRECs on a $60,000 system, after my incentives, my cost was $18,000. So I've been looking at solar for years and years and years, and it was the right time. I felt like it was the most cost-effective time to purchase. A typical home produces about 10 megawatts a year. So again, 10 megawatts, per year for 15 years. Basically what you're getting paid is the net present value of these dollars. And in most systems, if they're the smaller size, 10 kW or less, you get all that money in the first year. It might take them close to a year to pay you that money, but you're going to get it within the first 12 months. On the systems that were purchased of larger sizes, they spread that payout over 5 years. So one of the things that was really nice about how they set this program up is they put buckets of money set aside for different size systems. And we were so oversubscribed for the large solar systems over the past 4 or 5 years. Most of that money has been exhausted. We're still building systems that projects fell out and the money gets reallocated back into a bucket. And so we can then pick another one on a waiting list and build it and get them their money. Right now with the SREC program, about the only money that is left is for the smaller 10 kW business and residential home. And we're in block 2 of that money and would anticipate that money being available probably through, I'm going to say late fall, no later than probably the end of this calendar year. But that's just a little bit on the SREC credits. These come from the contract with a broker. We use Carbon Solutions Group, and basically they aggregate a bunch of little sales into a megawatt, and that's the block that they sell to the utility companies. Once they sell your block, that's when they have your money to turn around and sell or to pay you. So they take a cut off of it. The other thing to keep in mind is you're going to get a 1099 for this money. It is income. So that's always important to keep in mind when you're doing an analysis of a proposal. I highly recommend you ask for an after-tax proposal, not a before one. The before ones make your return on your investment look good, but it's not real. So if you can do an after-tax proposal, you'll be around 8 years for return on your investment. If you look at a pre-tax proposal, it might look more like 5. So make sure that you're asking those questions from anyone that you're talking to about a solar system. Go ahead, Ryder. So this is in regards to our Ameren in Missouri. They don't have an SREC program like the state of Illinois does, but Ameren does do a rebate based upon the size of the system and anything that we can find to help reduce the investment, still with a 26% federal tax credit, and even with the Ameren Missouri rebates. We've got people in the St. Louis metro area that continue to invest in solar at a pretty rapid pace. Go ahead, Ryan. So a couple of financing options. Go ahead. This is our Clean Energy Credit Union. This was what I referred to earlier, our Amicus group. Actually, we put this program together as a non-for-profit credit union. We can finance electric cars, solar systems, Tesla Powerwall. You can individually probably a high efficiency hot water heater, a geothermal, anything that has a federal tax credit. They're interested in doing a short-term loan on that amount and then helping you finance the balance. So the most common loan that we sell, and the one that I bought my solar system, was I took an 18-month 0% interest on the amount of my federal tax credit. That has given me adequate time to get my taxes filed, get my money back, and tee up that loan to be paid off at the end of 18 months. And then I finance the rest of the system for 2.99% on a 12-year loan. My payment's about $375 a month, but my utility bill was about, it was always around $3.25 to $3.50. So for those first, several years till you get back to the payback time, you're going to pay a little bit more than what you're spending in utilities, but the real payoff comes when you hit your payback, and then you got a system for the next 30 years is going to produce electricity for you and helping you avoid utility costs, which, by the way, escalate annually. Most of the quotes that I do, I give a very conservative 2.5% increase in utility costs from year to year. It's averaged higher than that. We don't get increases for a couple of years and then we'll get a nice one. So I think on average they've averaged around 4% increase over the past 10, 15 years. Go ahead, Riley. So this is my house, and it's kind of funny. I worked as I was a sales manager in the medical device industry. I worked for Johnson & Johnson for almost 30 years, and I retired, and I found myself really bored. I had mowed and done all the honeydews I could do around the house, but I've been interested in solar for a long time. And when I got to talking with the local representative that I work with here in Southern Illinois, in the process of buying that system, I was asking a lot of questions like, can a guy do this from his home? Because I've had an awful lot of sales experience. And this looked like something that I could take on as a retired guy and make some money and do something that I've always been interested in is promoting clean energy. And I came from a long family of coal miners, and I watched my brother, he's dying of black lung, and I have no doubt that his years working in the coal mine has affected his long-term health. And I would love to see these coal mining jobs replaced with alternative energy jobs. And it's a hard thing in Southern Illinois to deal with. This Southern Illinois is so heavily influenced by coal mining over the years. There isn't a single resident down here that didn't have a brother, uncle, dad, grandpa who made a living for their family in the coal mines. So talking about this is sensitive, and it's important that we stay focused on what's important, and that is developing a clean energy strategy that does employ people and help offset some of these fossil fuel jobs we're seeing. I mean, we're talking about the Lake of Egypt power plant closing down. That's who would ever thought that would even been possible 10 years ago. So enough of that. About my system, it's 64 panels of the REC 350. It is a ground mount. It uses 2 of the Solar Edge 10,000 inverters. So my AC size of my system is a 22.4 kilowatt system. This system will produce 976 megawatts of energy over 30 years. It'll save 23 metric tons of CO2. And I don't know who does this math, but they're telling me 30 acres of U.S. forest. I've always been one of those guys that everywhere my wife and I lived for the past 38 years, we've always planted trees. And it's always fun to go back and look at them years later and watch how they've grown. And I can't hardly go back and look at one of them without thinking, man, you should have pruned that tree a little bit more. So go ahead in the next slide, Riley. So here were the financials. Here was the total system cost under 60,000. There was my SREC value, my federal tax credit. So 19,000 was my total cost. But when you look at that 30-year electric savings bill, I mean, it's a substantial amount of money. And again, it's taking a very conservative estimate in the energy escalation cost. So I anticipate this to even be more. And there are not too many things I can think of investing in as an asset that actually pays you like this. If I went out and bought a new Escalade at $58,000, I might have a little depreciation if it was in business, but it's not going to return the kind of money that this investment in a solar system has. Okay, Riley? So let's just take a quick tour of it. Go ahead and start that, Riley. This is the ground mount. And there's a couple of things that I'd like to share with you. And Riley, when you get around to the back side, if you'll just stop it for a minute.
Sure.
So here are the 64 panels. It's built on the north edge of our home, sets between our property and our cornfield. And the one thing that I want to point out, Riley, you can stop it right there if you want. This is a controller box, but the thing that I wanted to point out is when we put a ground mount in, we use piles. So this is a heavy steel C-clamp, this main structure running up and down. That thing is driven with a pile driver 8 foot in the ground. And we set our ground mounts in these versus the tubular metal with ground screws. These things are rated much higher than most other ground mounted systems. Having these piles driven in the ground like this. We used to set them in concrete, but we found out driving them in 8 feet was much more stable over a period of time. So if you're ever looking at a system and you're looking at a ground mount, pay attention to what racking system they're using, because there's a lot of lightweight tubular steel that's just a little bit bigger than the old tent poles that we used to put the family tent up with, and they're secured to the ground by running a 16-inch or 2 foot heavily threaded screw in the ground to hold them onto the ground. So that's important to understand, because those are pretty inexpensive ground mounting systems, but that might not be what's best for you. Go ahead and start it some more. And if you look around the back side of this, I mentioned you can stop it right there, Riley. So I used a solar edge inverters, but we talked about having the power optimizers. So I could have used an SMA string inverter and it would have worked beautifully on this system. But I wanted the most optimal energy producing system I could have, and I'm convinced that these power optimizers will mitigate any shading issues that I have. And we have a lot of geese out here that live on the lake, and for some reason they fly right over this thing and they make a mess on it. And I go to bed at night knowing that I'm not losing any energy waiting for the next rain, because all my other panels are mitigating any obstruction that's on one of my solar panels. One other thing that I chose a ground mount, I had some good solar exposure on my roofs, but one of the things that I wanted to be able to do, we farm 15 acres around this property. And when you farm, it's dusty and there's a lot of dust accumulation. And even though the rain will, rinse that dust off, you will develop a film. And I just wanted to be able to come out there with a 5-gallon bucket and just knock the dust off this thing a couple of times a year. So that was one of the other reasons why I chose a ground mount. Go ahead, Riley, you can start it some more. And this just gives you a good view. I mow, this is always something to keep in mind, but you can see where I mow right up to the back side of these posts. and then I mow right out in the front side of the panels. And then I've just used Roundup to keep my weeds down here underneath this. My eventual plan is to come in and demulch this where I don't mow. Okay, you can stop that there, Riley. So you see the little electrical stick up down there low to the ground. That is actually where the wire comes from my solar system and comes into my garage. Go ahead and keep going. And then you see this big panel with the red placard on it. That's the main disconnect switch. And then right next to that is a production meter, because you can stop it right there, Riley. Because of the size of my system, rather than just having a dual meter, Ameren puts in a production meter here. So it gives me an ongoing lifetime calculation of how many kilowatts and how many megawatts hours my system has produced. And then right next to that is my main meter that was there before. Go ahead and start it, and you can leave it running. You'll see this meter running backwards. This is a bi-directional meter there with the green on it. That's the main Ameren meter. And if you look real close, you can see little black dots right underneath the numbers. And you'll see those black dots. You'll see them running backwards. See how they're moving from right to left? That means that I am sending more to the grid than I'm using in my house. And during the summer, that thing runs backwards all day, especially on a sunny day. So when you come into the garage, we talked about that low box down there. That's where it comes in from the solar system. You can see that it branches off to each one of the inverters. And these inverters, see those nice little blue lights. So when I pull into the garage and park, I can take a quick glance over there, and I know that everything's running great. If there's any type of problem, go ahead and stop that there, Riley, for a second. If there's any problem, I'll be able to see that. Now, that camera just showed the conduit that runs up to the ceiling. This system is attached to my wireless router on our property out here. That's how I can monitor. That's how StraightUp Solar can look at the system and run diagnostics. And that's how Carbon Solutions verifies the output of this solar system so that they manage that contract properly for your SRECs. Go ahead and start some more, Riley. So there are the inverters. And then basically they just come into this box here and they go back out to the meter. So that's the setup of how the solar system works. There's no moving parts, and once they're installed properly, you should have very little problem with these. They have 25-year warranties on the inverters and on the panels. We have our 10-year workmanship warranty. So this isn't something that when you invest in it, you're going to be dealing with service issues and dealing with a company that is nickel and diming you for service calls. So that's just a good look at the Talley solar array. I appreciate you taking the time to join us. Stephen, do you or Nancy have any questions for me?
I don't have any questions. We've had solar since 2014. We're in St. Charles, Missouri. We had StraightUp Solar install for us. And I was just, I tried to get on to the other webinar about Tesla Powerwall, but I couldn't get on that one. But I guess our next step would be maybe to install a battery, but we still need to do a lot of, research on it. And because our system is 5.5 years old, it'll be 6 in January. We just have to figure out if it's worth doing the battery.
Well, Nancy, one of the, and there will be more Powerwall presentations. And as I mentioned earlier, they're being really well attended. There's a lot of interest there. And you can either wait for one of those, or if you want to go to that link and fill out some personal information, We have all kinds of product developers out of our St. Louis office that would,
Mhm.
that information forwarded, they would follow up. One thing that I want to make sure that you understand is because you would be installing a battery in conjunction with solar, it does qualify for the 26% tax credit. And
Oh, okay.
that's the incentive that you would definitely want to take advantage of.
Right.
And then the other thing to be thinking about is what you're looking for. Are you looking for critical load backup? Like I mentioned, you know, a lot of people that have a gas generator, if they have a power outage, they just roll that thing up close to the house. They drop utility cords and plug in their fridge, their freezer. You know, they've just got drop cords running out to their generator. And that's you know, that's a good way to carry you through a short, you know, short period of time. The nice thing about you know, having a battery like that is you can accomplish that without going out and getting your generator out and, you know, firing it up. And I've got a situation like that. I have a sump pump that our groundwater here, it seems like it's always running. And if we have a really, really heavy downpour, I have more water coming in to my sump pump than what my pump takes out. So it took us, like the first year we moved in, we had a couple times where the water came up out of the sump pit, and so I put another sump pump in there and routed it to my sewer line in the basement. And I can keep my pit even in the wildest rain. I can keep it empty now, but I lay in bed at night every night thinking, and I leave a light on when it storms because if the power goes out, I probably have a whopping 15 minutes tops to get that generator out, get a line dropped, and get that sump pump plugged in, or I'm going to have water in the basement. So I'm looking at some alternatives with a battery backup that's not a Tesla Powerwall, but just a battery backup down in the basement for my sump pump. But those are the things to think about. A critical load, or do you just want to be the only house on the block that's got your air conditioner running and your outdoor lights working while everybody else is trying to hook their generator up?
And I personally, I like the idea of being able to use some of the power that I've generated, because Ameren gives me, I was just looking at my latest bill, and they pay me, oh, it's pathetic.
They pay you
for the amount of money
they charge
that,
you 11, right? Is that how they do?
it's it's a little over 2 cents, almost 3 cents.
Yeah.
Whereas I pay at least 8 cents.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd love to be able to,
Yeah.
you know, take some of that and be able to use it rather than sell it back to Ameren.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, there is a nice tool. If you Google how many firewalls do I need,
Okay.
it brings up a really nice tool that you can say, okay, I run my coffee maker, I run my dishwasher, I run my dryer, and it allows you how many times a week, for how long, and with just real quick point and click and entering just a little bit of data, it'll tally what your usage is, and then it'll tell you how long do you want all this stuff to run. You want it 1 day, 2 days, and it'll calculate how many you need. And it's just a nice tool to kind of, you know, give you an idea of what your needs are. When you have a utility metering program like Ameren, Missouri, that is probably one of the main reasons why people invest in these batteries, so that they can self-consume more of the energy that they generate. Now, the other thing that's coming, Nancy, that this is also going to have a big impact on, they're doing it in California where they have time of day metering. So when you wake up in the morning at 6:30 till 10, they charge you an outrageous rate for the energy you're using. And then at 10 o'clock till 3, they charge you next to nothing because nobody's using electric. They're not home. And so then when you roll back around to 3:30, 4 o'clock, the rates go back up until about 7, 8 o'clock at night. So one of the things that this Tesla Powerwall allows you to do is to program in those time of use billing times.
Oh, right.
it'll manage distribution from your battery during high meter rates. It's just the beauty of that product. It's got some really nice programmable features.
Yeah.
They haven't done that yet in Missouri or Illinois, but you better believe the utility companies are trying to figure a way to capture more revenue, and they certainly see solar and battery storage as, they see it as a threat. Legally, they have to support it, but they certainly view it as a threat.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I agree. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Steve,
you for your explanation.
I guess not. Well, listen, here's my information. It's with my email and my phone number. Like Riley said earlier, there's a link that if you just click on it and fill out some basic data, that goes to our sales support team. And what they do is they'll gather a lot of that information, and then they forward it off to a guy like me that'll follow up with a phone call and get you a quote, give you financing options. And Nancy, pretty much to do what you went through when you bought your solar system. It's real similar. But I certainly appreciate both of you taking the time to join us. We'll do more of these, so just kind of keep an eye on the, and Nancy, one thing I noticed, and Riley, you might be able to confirm it, but I thought I saw an open house in the St. Louis market. So, that might be, an area where you can get a little bit more information about how things have been affected. But if you're using solar in that market, you probably know that information as well as anybody else. But do reach out if you have any questions and you need help with anything. That's what we're here for. And really, I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, it looks like we have a couple chats.
Good. Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, but looks like we don't have any questions. Thank you all for joining. Oh, you do? Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm currently working with Jim Dixon on a proposal that he's given to me. And it's also a 64 panel system for the roof of my house. Unfortunately,
Even you hit your mute button.
unfortunately, yeah, I was on a temporary. So I had some questions about the, you're using the microinverters on your panels, but then you also have two 10,000 watt inverters.
That's correct. I'm using the power optimizer modules on in conjunction with the Solar Edge 10 kW inverter.
I'm sorry, I have to turn this
When
up.
you say micro inverter, you're referring to the Phase product line.
Okay, so
that might be what Jimmy's.
So it looks the same as what's on your panels, but it's actually a different piece.
Yeah, the difference is you saw where my inverters were in the garage. So what happens is from those controller boxes out at the solar array all the way to my garage, I am running DC current through the cables underground.
Right.
If you use Phase, that line that comes from the solar array to the house is an AC line.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah, and there's some benefits and disadvantages for either or, distance that you run, voltage drop versus distance with DC or AC. So, but that is a pretty substantial difference between the Phase or the SMA or the Solar Edge inverters, SMAs and Solar Edge. Now, you can set, so I could have set those inverters out of my array and ran AC back to my meter. So there's a lot of different, ways to do it. It just depends on what's most optimal for the installation and the cost, the best value for the customer.
It would seem to me that the inverters on the individual panels would also make it easier for you to add battery power or Tesla wall to it later on. And the advantage and disadvantage between running the AC and DC back and forth. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Well, I'm certainly not one of our electricians, but in
Okay,
several,
you have a system, so you know.
yeah, well, in the design meetings that we have, what I hear is that you can run the AC line a longer distance. You can also use aluminum versus when you run the DC line, they want to use copper.
Perfect.
Now, I'm talking about systems down in Southern Illinois with Egyptian and Ameren. That might be, their preferences down here. But that's the main technical difference that I know in AC versus DC, the size of the gauge of the wire and how far or how limited the distance is for either one. And I don't have any specifics for you, Stephen, other than those are the areas of consideration when you're looking at that.
Very good. Yeah, thank you for that, because the buried aluminum, I'm thinking, is probably going to work better for me. It looks like my system's going to end up having panels in two places, both on the house and then also on the detached garage,
Yeah.
to get it up to snuff. My goal was to try to produce 100% of my electricity, not necessarily have to save it, but over a year's period of time, if I can replace my electric bill with a solar bill,
Right.
that's wonderful. At the end of the warranty period, 25 years, I'm assuming we're probably going to have to replace panels.
Not necessarily. So a solar panel, it degrades over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
0.007%, I think, is the number. But we guarantee that after 10 years, it will produce at least 85% of the original production.
Mm-hmm.
When we get to the 25-year mark, we feel that it is degraded down to probably 80%. But you can continue to use those solar panels for many years after that 25-year mark. It just is going to annually degrade a little bit more. And eventually, when you get to a point to where you feel like they're not producing the kind of energy you want, then yeah, looking at an alternative of replacing them would be the best thing.
Okay.
I figured in 25 years, I'm not going to be alive, and that would be somebody else's problem.
The picture that's up on the screen is not reflective of the same color hair that I currently have.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Are you gray-headed now?
I'm thinking that picture was from 2005. My best guess. Yeah. I'm probably, was that your phone number that you put up on the screen there?
Yeah, and I can share that again if
I've got it. I already dialed it.
perfect.
There. Yeah, I would probably, if you don't mind, I would probably enjoy talking to you some more about some stuff that doesn't need to be over this air.
No, you're more than welcome to call me anytime. I'm passionate about this business. I did it I wanted to save the money, no doubt about that. But my interest in solar for, I don't know, 20 years has just simply been, I've watched a brother, in the coal mines for his whole life and just wish there was something better for him. And we also have a young man that's one of our key installers in St. Louis that was a coal miner in Sparta. And, you listen to that kid's testimony about what it's like going down in that mine versus climbing up on a roof in the sunshine. He's got a pretty impactful story.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it. I've seen some of the equipment that comes out to be rebuilt from the coal mines.
Right.
It's pretty nasty. Okay.
Even you're working with a good man, Jimmy. He'll take good care of you. If you need to bounce any ideas or check, don't hesitate to give me a buzz.
Thank you.
I don't know everything, but I'm sharp enough to know that if I don't know it, I'm not going to wing it. I'll tell you, and I'll find an answer and get back to you. Okay.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining in.